Welcome to the Universal Rainbow Faith Blogcast, where spiritual truth, reflection, and transformation come to life.
Imagine you want to send a message to one of the most powerful, heavily guarded, and I mean deeply polarizing politicians on earth.
Right, which is not an easy task.
Exactly. You don't have a super PAC backing you. You don't have a lobbyist on retainer.
Yeah.
But what you do have is a 12-step recovery workbook, a claim of military-grade psychic abilities, and a secret message from God involving a small green dinosaur.
Which is just a wild combination of things to bring to the table.
It really is. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a truly staggering piece of modern source material today.
Yeah, we are.
It's an open letter titled A Letter of Love and Divine Truth to Donald Trump and the GOP from One the World Has Rejected.
Quite a title.
Right. It was written by Reverend Paula Josephine Sadler and published back in May of 2025 on the Universal Rainbow Faith website.
And, it is a document that actively defies pretty much every convention of modern political communication.
Yeah, completely.
Usually when people address a former president or a major political party, they use, highly tested talking points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or legal threats or focus grouped outrage.
Yeah, the standard playbook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this letter just entirely abandons all of that.
So the mission of our deep dive today is to explore how marginalized voices use deeply personal, spiritual, and sometimes, frankly, intensely mystical frameworks to address the figures at the center of our political divides.
Right.
For you listening right now, consider this a shortcut to understanding the really complex mechanics of how faith, trauma, and modern politics collide.
But before we go any further, I do need to make something crystal clear for everyone listening.
Yes, very important point here.
As we unpack this letter, we are treating it strictly as a cultural artifact. We are not taking any sides here.
No, not at all.
We aren't here to endorse the politics of the left or the right. We also aren't here to validate whether someone can, actually psychically view a Russian laboratory, or whether her theological claims are absolute truth. The source material touches directly on highly charged figures like Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, and the very intense national debates around transgender rights.
It covers a lot of ground.
It does. So our job today is to impartially analyze how this author is constructing her message in the middle of a massive cultural divide.
Yeah, looking at the psychological and rhetorical tools she deploys, because this letter swings from a grounded, deeply human story of overcoming severe alcoholism.
Yeah.
To visions of geopolitical assassinations, to claims of remote viewing, and eventually to that cryptographic secret message from the divine.
It's quite a journey.
It is. But to even begin to understand the political message being sent to a former and current president, we first have to understand the crucible that forged the messenger herself.
Absolutely. You have to start with her story.
Because Paula's story starts with the literal fight to just exist. She was born on December 19th, 1975, and she was profoundly premature.
Right, against all odds.
Exactly. She weighed just 3 pounds, she couldn't breathe on her own, couldn't see, and the doctors gave her less than a 20% chance to survive the night.
And that tenuous grasp on survival wasn't just her own isolated experience, It was actually a recurring theme in her family's history.
Yeah, her mother went through a lot.
She really did. Her mother experienced 7 pregnancies but endured 4 miscarriages, meaning only 3 children actually survived.
Wow.
So from the literal moment Paula takes her first breath, her narrative is anchored in beating these overwhelming systemic odds.
Right.
It builds this foundational worldview that existence itself is just a hard-fought miracle.
And that foundation was tested constantly as she grew up. Her family dynamic was fraught, to say the least.
Yeah.
Her father was an alcoholic who eventually died at age 61 in 1998. He actually contracted a staph infection after breaking his hip.
Such a tragic progression.
It is. But the trauma of addiction didn't stop with him, right? Paula struggled with those exact same demons herself.
Which is so common in families with a history of addiction.
Exactly. But the turning point in her life came when she found her way to a 12-step recovery program at the age of 26.
Right, and she's been sober for a long time now.
Yeah, sober for 22 years.
I want to pause on that 22-year sobriety, actually, because the 12-step philosophy fundamentally changes the mechanics of how a person processes the world.
It's not just about quitting drinking.
No, not at all.
Not at
It
all.
provides this highly structured, almost rigid framework for processing trauma, resentment, and human fallibility.
And we see that specifically in her relationship with her parents regarding her identity. So she came out as transgender at 19.
Right.
Her mother, who was a born-again Christian raised in the Catholic Church, initially struggled deeply with this revelation.
Which you might expect, given the background.
Yeah, though she did eventually come to a place of love and acceptance, which is great. But her father, this flawed, sick man with whom she barely had a relationship growing up, gave her this profound moment of radical acceptance right before he died.
Yeah, that moment is so powerful.
He simply looked at her and told her to do what makes you happy. He modeled a raw, totally unpolished form of unconditional love.
Right.
He didn't offer some complex theological justification, he just offered grace.
Yeah.
And Paula uses that specific interaction as the baseline for how leaders should view the citizens they govern.
Okay, let's unpack this because this is where the letter structurally departs from normal political discourse.
Need time.
In a 12-step program, one of the most grueling tasks is step 4, right? The fearless moral inventory.
Oh, yeah, it's intense.
You literally draw columns on a piece of paper. You
Sure.
list out every person who has harmed you, what exactly they did, how it threatened your security or ego, and crucially, what your own part in the resentment might be.
Right, you're auditing your own resentments.
Exactly. It's designed for personal grievances. You put your abusive ex or your toxic boss on that list to work toward forgiving them.
Yeah.
But Paula takes this super intimate psychological tool and applies it to the geopolitical stage.
Which is wild. It's completely wild. She put Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, the COVID-19 virus itself, and God on her personal forgiveness inventory.
What's fascinating here is how staggering an expansion of the concept that is.
Oh, for sure.
She is taking a tool designed to heal interpersonal resentment, like a family squabble or a bad boss, like you said, and she's deploying it against macro-level global conflicts.
Wait, I have to admit I'm struggling with the logic of this, though.
How so?
Well, framing a billionaire politician or an autocratic foreign leader as just a sick person trying to get well feels incredibly naive.
I could see that.
How does treating a politician like a patient in a 12-step meeting actually accomplish anything politically? Instead of demanding policy changes, she's actively trying to forgive him. It feels like trying to run a massive enterprise software update on a single broken laptop.
That's a great analogy, and it does seem naive if you view it purely as a legislative strategy, right?
Yeah.
Like this isn't going to pass a bill.
No, definitely not.
But rhetorically, look at the psychological shift that takes place. By forcing political adversaries through the lens of a recovery program, she completely strips them of their political and institutional armor.
Oh, I see.
In her framework, Donald Trump is no longer this invincible enemy or some abstract partisan avatar. He is reduced, or honestly, perhaps elevated, to just a fallible human being.
Interesting.
In the context of a 12-step meeting, everyone is spiritually sick. It levels the playing field completely.
Right, there's no hierarchy in those rooms.
Exactly. She isn't looking up at a powerful executive. She is looking across the room at another human who she believes is suffering from a sickness of the spirit. She's establishing a baseline of radical empathy, which ironically gives her this psychological high ground.
And she puts that radical empathy to the test immediately when she addresses the GOP's rhetoric regarding her own existence.
Yeah, she doesn't hold back.
She points out that Trump has used words like ideology or insanity to describe transgender people. But instead of countering with, sociological data or legal arguments.
It's the usual approach.
Right. She challenges him with direct, intensely familial questioning. She asks him point blank, would you love me as your child? Would you abandon me? Would you send me away for conversion therapy? Disown me?
Notice the deliberate pivot from the macro to the micro there.
Yeah.
She is taking national, highly polarizing talking points and basically forcing them into a hypothetical living room.
Exactly.
She is demanding that he look at the policy through the lens of a parent looking at a vulnerable child.
And she also goes out of her way to prove she isn't approaching this as some partisan operative. She actually outlines her voting record in the letter.
Right, to show she's an independent thinker.
Yeah, she's a registered Democrat who votes by conscience. She voted for Obama and proudly notes she got a thank you letter back from the White House in 2013.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. She voted for Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. But, crucially, she reveals that she specifically prayed for Donald Trump when he was elected in 2016 and again in 2024.
Which totally scrambles the usual partisan expectations.
It really does. She asserts that the presence of trans people isn't a plague on the nation. The actual plague, she argues, is hatred stemming from the unawakened soul, or what she terms human unkind.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, again, maintaining our neutral analytical lens here,
Always.
what we are observing is her attempt to diagnose political polarization not as a failure of policy or economics, but as a fundamental failure of the human spirit.
Right.
She is trying to bypass the political brain entirely and speak straight to the spiritual brain.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here for everyone listening.
Go for it.
She's essentially asking a billionaire politician, a guy surrounded by advisors and guarded by the Secret Service, to mentally play the role of a father to a marginalized stranger.
Yeah.
Is this kind of deeply intimate moral framing ever actually effective in modern politics?
Well, historically, there is a very deep precedent for this exact strategy.
Really?
Think of spiritual activists throughout history, figures in the civil rights movement, or leaders of nonviolent anti-war protests.
Oh, sure.
They consistently bypass legislative arguments to appeal directly to the humanity of the rulers.
Right. Appealing to their conscience.
On a strategic level, speaking in the quiet, intimate language of a parent and child creates massive cognitive dissonance for the reader.
I can imagine.
When you are bracing for a political attack and instead someone asks, "Would you disown me if I were your daughter?" Standard political talking points just fail. They fall flat. It highlights the shared human condition over the partisan divide.
But, empathy only gets you so far in politics.
Unfortunately true.
When radical empathy fails to get a politician's attention, what is the next logical escalation for someone with no institutional power, no lobbyist, and no money?
Well, this is where things take a turn.
It really does. This is where the letter takes a massive, honestly disorienting pivot. She leans entirely into mysticism.
Yeah, she escalates her authority.
Exactly. Since the political system hasn't worked, she leans into her self-proclaimed mystical authority. She claims to possess remote viewing abilities, which she explicitly compares to the U.S. government's declassified Stargate project.
Right, and for context for the listener, the Stargate project was a real, highly classified U.S. Army unit established in 1978 at Fort Meade.
It sounds like a movie, but it's real.
It was real. The military was genuinely investigating the potential for psychic phenomena, specifically remote viewing, which is supposedly the ability to see distant or hidden targets using the mind, purely for military intelligence purposes.
Right.
It was eventually canceled in the 1990s, but the fact that the government spent millions researching it gives the concept a veneer of institutional credibility in certain circles.
Exactly. And Paula claims she has been experiencing this kind of psychic phenomenon for over 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, she states that after 9/11, when she was 25 years old, she was instructed by God to write a book called The Nature of Miracles, subtitled Vol 1, Scrapbook for Daily Guidance. But it's not her past writings she wants Trump to focus on right now. It's her recent visions.
Right, the stakes are higher now.
Much higher. In September 2020, she claimed she had a remote viewing vision of a secret New World Order meeting.
And who was at this meeting?
In this vision, officials from the U.S., Ukraine, Russia, China, and a 4-star Air Force general were convened to discuss the origins of COVID-19.
And during this remote viewing session, she says she sensed that a doctor named Sasha was in grave physical danger.
Yes, and here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm ready.
There is a bizarre true crime parallel that she anchors this vision to. Months after she claims to have had this vision, a real-life molecular biologist in Russia named Dr. Sasha Alexander Kagansky.
A real person.
A real person. A man who was reportedly working on a natural COVID vaccine. He was found dead. He was stabbed and fell from a 14th-floor window in St. Petersburg.
Wow.
Now, political assassinations involving windows in Russia are unfortunately common.
Very true.
But here is the specific detail she uses to validate her vision. He and Paula shared the exact same birth date.
You're kidding.
Nope, December 19th, 1975. And he died on December 19th, 2020, their 45th birthday.
This requires us to look at the psychological mechanism of pattern recognition here.
Yeah, please explain this.
Why include this Russian scientist in a letter to Donald Trump about transgender rights, right?
Okay.
It seems so disconnected.
It does seem totally random.
But when a marginalized person is experiencing intense trauma, or when society feels deeply unstable, the human brain actively hunts for synchronicity. We look for patterns to make sense of the chaos.
That makes a lot of sense.
By anchoring her unprovable mystical claims to a highly verifiable, real-world geopolitical event like a death you can look up on international news sites, she is attempting to borrow empirical credibility.
Oh,
If the reader can verify the scientist's death and the shared birthday, they might subconsciously validate her spiritual authority too.
And she builds on that borrowed authority. She details a 2025 vision warning of the dangers of Neuralink, uncontrolled AI, and government infiltration.
She covers all the modern anxieties.
She really does. She even claims to have viewed a demonic force emanating from Mar-a-Lago known as Tarutunach. Yeah. Now, to her credit, she admits that this demon might only be operating in the subconscious or spiritual realm rather than being like a literal physical entity walking the halls of the resort.
She is constructing a resume of the unseen. She is saying, I see the hidden forces shaping your world.
Which leads to the absolute climax of her mystical escalation.
Right.
After laying out all these geopolitical visions, she offers Trump undeniable proof of her connection to the divine.
This is the cryptographic part.
Yes. She shares a transcribed dialogue between her and God, where she explicitly asks the creator for a sign, something she couldn't possibly know, but that Trump will instantly recognize as an inside secret.
Right.
And God's reported answer, a small green dinosaur.
A seemingly nonsensical, highly specific, totally private detail.
It functions exactly like spiritual two-factor authentication.
That's hilarious, but yes.
It's a cryptographic handshake, right?
Yeah.
If someone walks up to you and says, I have a message from your mother, and to prove it, she said to mention the broken blue teacup, you are instantly going to listen to them.
You have to. It's too specific.
Right. If I'm reading this letter, I am hooked by that dinosaur detail. But I have to ask you, does throwing in something this bizarre actually validate a prophet's message? Or does it completely distract from the grounded, empathetic plea she was making about 12-step recovery earlier?
That is the incredibly dangerous tightrope walked by the mystic.
Yeah.
Historically, esoteric claims and highly specific insider knowledge are often the only tools available for marginalized prophets to demand an audience with the powerful.
Oh, I see.
Think of Joan of Arc. She was a peasant girl who gained an audience with the future King Charles VII of France.
How?
By allegedly revealing a secret to him that only he and God knew.
Wow, that's exactly the same playbook.
It is. When you have no institutional power, claiming exclusive access to hidden, divine knowledge is a mechanism to force the king's guards to let you in.
Right.
Whether the small green dinosaur is a genuine spiritual revelation or just a manifestation of her subconscious, its rhetorical function is identical. It acts as a hook.
It dares the politician to dismiss her while planting this tiny, unshakable seed of doubt. Like, what if she actually knows?
Exactly. What if she sees the entire board while we're all just looking at the pieces?
That is fascinating. And once she has theoretically hooked him with that esoteric mystery, she abandons the apocalyptic warnings entirely.
Right. She brings it back to Earth.
She brings the letter back to its ultimate thesis, an urgent, desperate plea for unity before the clock runs out on humanity.
Yeah.
She warns that angels and lightworkers might soon be leaving this world because humanity has become too hostile to help.
And we should probably clarify that term for our listeners.
Yeah, go ahead.
In New Age and alternative spiritualities, light workers are believed to be individuals whose specific purpose is to heal, spread positive energy, and elevate the spiritual consciousness of the planet.
Okay, got it.
So by warning of their departure, she is establishing a cosmic ticking clock. She's elevating the stakes. The crisis isn't just an upcoming midterm election. The crisis is total spiritual abandonment.
And to prevent that abandonment, she offers a solution in the form of a guided prayer specifically written for Trump.
It's a very intense prayer, too.
It is. She asks him to pray to set aside everything I think I know about myself, my own wealth, billionaires, and you, God, to experience a profound shift in his spirit.
In mystical traditions, this is known as ego death.
Right.
Which is just a brilliant and audacious request to make of a politician.
Especially a president.
Exactly. The modern political system, and specifically the role of the presidency, requires a massive, almost impenetrable ego. To run for the highest office, you must fundamentally believe you alone are capable of fixing the world. She is asking him to voluntarily dismantle the very psychological armor that got him elected.
And she backs up this request for humility by quoting scripture. She quotes Matthew 25:40, the famous verse where Jesus says, "Whatever you do for the least of these, you do for him."
A classic appeal to Christian charity.
Yeah, and she masterfully aligns her own marginalized identity with the great unexpected outsiders of the Bible. She compares herself to the Samaritan woman at the well, to the forgotten shepherd boy David before he became king, and to the Ethiopian eunuch, a sexual minority who was nonetheless embraced by the early church.
She really knows her biblical history.
She does, and she caps it off by quoting Psalm 118.22. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
That scripture is the perfect encapsulation of her entire identity in this document.
How so?
The builders, meaning society, the political establishment, the GOP, have rejected her as defective or unnecessary.
Right.
Yet she is claiming that the perspective of the rejected is actually the foundational cornerstone required to heal the nation.
So what does this all mean? When we step back and look at the entirety of this deep dive.
Yeah.
She's positioning herself as the ultimate outsider speaking truth to ultimate power. You have a trans woman with a traumatic past claiming remote viewing abilities, writing from the depths of her heart to a billionaire former president.
It's a modern David and Goliath setup.
Exactly. But instead of a slingshot and a stone, she is armed with a pen, a 12-step workbook, a prayer for ego death, and a secret about a small green dinosaur.
This raises an important question about the value of analyzing an artifact like this.
Yeah, why do it?
Even if a reader vehemently disagrees with her politics or completely dismisses the concept of remote viewing or rejects her theological interpretations, the core message remains profound.
I agree.
It is a testament to an individual who actively refuses to let the hostility of the world strip away her capacity to love unconditionally. In a political ecosystem that literally monetizes our mutual disgust for one another, choosing to write a sprawling, vulnerable letter of forgiveness to a leader you believe is actively harming you is an act of deep rebellion.
A rebellion of radical empathy.
Exactly.
We've spent this deep dive unpacking a document that swings wildly from the poignant, grounded realities of a 12-step recovery program.
Yeah.
To intense political pleas for transgender rights, to the remote viewing of geopolitical assassinations, all wrapped in a desperate plea for divine, unconditional love.
It is a remarkable synthesis of the deeply personal, the highly political, and the entirely mystical.
And why should you, the listener, care about this obscure open letter?
It's a fair question.
Because we live in an age of algorithm-driven, 280-character political anger. We are fed a constant diet of cynicism.
Every single day.
It is deeply jarring, and honestly, perhaps necessary, to read something that attempts to bridge our deepest cultural divides using the language of radical, mystical empathy.
It challenges the listener to consider whether they view their own political opponents as irredeemable enemies or as fallible humans suffering from a sickness of the spirit.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own.
Okay.
Think about the concept of Paula's small green dinosaur. In a loud, chaotic world full of noise, what is your personal small green dinosaur?
I love that question.
What is that tiny, inexplicable, private detail in your life that, if a stranger suddenly mentioned it, would instantly prove to you that they were seeing the real you past all the armor you wear for the world?
It is the ultimate question of what it takes for any of us to truly feel seen by another human being.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the sources around you, and we will catch you next time.
I was never a mistake, never hidden by design. Before the world could name me, love had already called me mine. I learned to quiet